What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It's February 29th, 2024, and it's Leap Day. It's super exciting that it's Leap Day. I just happened to start this podcast this year, and it's a leap year. And the ACA Strengthening My Recovery book just happens to include an affirmation for February 29th, which is very exciting. So this is sort of a bonus episode because there are 366 days this year. So it's not really the 365 Shares podcast. It's a 366 Shares podcast. So you're welcome. The topic for today is guilt. And the Big Red Book says the critical inner parent gives us that guilt feeling when we think about asking for what we need. I feel like the statement could apply to so many things, but I think it especially applies to people in ACA who sometimes feel like they had it pretty good, or they don't have a right to complain about the things that were wrong in their childhood. It seems like the worse people's childhoods were, the more they suffered abuse, the worse they lived in poverty, the easier it is for them to kind of come and bare their souls and feel confident that they need ACA, that they are adult children, that there is recovery to be done, and that what they experienced was really awful and traumatic. What I've seen with a lot of people, especially people who grew up maybe more middle class or even upper class, there's a lot of guilt around feeling like they belong in the program or feeling like they're whining compared to some of the other people in the program who may have had worse lives. There's this sense of, I always had a roof over my head, nobody ever beat me. But they know the emotional wounds they suffered were real, and they know that they are acting as adult children in their lives and that they have problems that they need to resolve. I've definitely seen this in my meetings. I think people are so uncomfortable opening up, especially if they felt like they maybe had a more privileged life. And I don't think it really matters how much money your family had. I don't think it matters what type of abuse you had, whether you're in there for alcoholism in your family, for religious abuse, for any other type of dysfunction. The results are the same. And that is really the message of the program is no matter what landed you in here, you have the same pattern of behavior. You either identify with the laundry list traits or the other laundry list traits. One is you're more of a victim. The other is you're more of an aggressor. And again, it doesn't matter what your family did to you, said to you. You were born this perfect person, but you weren't able to grow into a healthy, mature version of yourself. You weren't able to exhibit your natural, God-given traits because of what was going on around you. So the message for today is really try to move past that guilt you have. You may have even heard it directly from your parents. They might have told you, I'm putting a roof over your head. I'll give you something to cry about. Your life isn't that bad. I had it way worse than you did. We need to move past that critical inner voice. We need to move past the guilt and the messages that we've received so that we can begin to be honest about our experience, about our thoughts and feelings, and so that we can move into healing and recovery. I'm Steph, and this is my share. The affirmation for today is, on this day, I will look inward, ask for help from my fellow travelers and my higher power. I will forgive myself if I'm less than perfect. My critical inner parent's voice is losing its power over me. The big thing that stands out for me in this affirmation is asking for help. And if we're so mired in our privilege, if we're so mired in feeling like we had it better than somebody else, which is a little bit of a false ego, we know that our childhood was traumatic for us, but we also have to protect ourselves. We also have to project this image of confidence to the world and feel like, oh, well, I always had toys on Christmas and I never went hungry and my parents never got divorced. Any number of things you feel like might set you apart from other adult children, other dysfunctional families. But we need to move past this ego. We need to move past this grandiosity that is a result of our insecurities and really share our experience and be honest and open with our fellow travelers because that's the only way to heal. So if you've been going to meetings or if you're thinking about going to meetings, but maybe you haven't felt comfortable sharing because you didn't have it as bad as someone who grew up in the mountains of West Virginia and was beaten and sexually assaulted and grew up in poverty and is missing teeth, you have just as much of a right to be in this program. You have just as much of a right to have your feelings as anyone who has suffered the worst abuse imaginable. And just because abuse doesn't leave physical scars, it doesn't mean that the damage that it caused to your soul and your psyche aren't real. Where I feel like I might have had a leg up on other people is that I got a very good education. I went to college, I had a work-study job, I had some scholarship money, I had federal grant money, and I also had student aid because I was living with my grandparents who were retired at that point and didn't really have an income. So I was very lucky that I was able to go to college and get a good education. I know not everyone has had that experience. But I also grew up having had very serious trauma in my family that I felt set me apart from other people. So even though I never experienced real serious poverty the way that some people have, I had experienced more trauma than a lot of my peers, like big T trauma, that at the time growing up, before we knew as much about healing and EMDR and therapy that we do now, it was the type of trauma that people felt like you couldn't really come back from. I don't think I really put myself on a pedestal as much because I know that I've really had some serious stuff go down in my background. But I have seen people come and go to meetings and feel like they can't really open up because their problems were a little bit more white collar and their problems were more emotional. And maybe their problems were the problems that people in society have, where they're really trying so hard to pretend that there are no problems with the family, even though there are. And a good example I will give is my ex-husband's family, where my ex-husband's parents both were children of very, very serious alcoholics. 3 of their 4 parents were like fall down drunk alcoholics, a lot of poverty, but they both got educations and worked really hard and made a lot of money. And so they always wanted to project this image of wealth and health and prosperity. So it was like no jeans in the dining room, and my mother-in-law always had her nails done. But underneath that, there were a lot of secrets in the family. There was a lot of anxiety. The expectations on all of the kids were astronomical. And if any of the kids disappointed the parents or did something that didn't help project this family image of just super prosperity, then the kids heard about it, even into adulthood, in some ways that were really shocking. And I've said this before, but I really wish that my ex-husband and I had found ACA. I don't know if it would have saved our marriage necessarily. I know that that relationship ultimately was not right for either of us, but I think we would have been able to find a lot more healing together and individually through this program. But we did have a lot of problems with his family, and there was a lot of denial around the damage that had been caused because his parents had had such a different experience growing up than what they gave their children. I think they wanted to believe that they had put all that dysfunction in the past and put it behind them. But as we know, that's really not how family dysfunction works. You have to really feel it and address it and heal from it in order to stop passing it down to the next generation. So for anyone out there who worried that they didn't have it bad enough to qualify to go to ACA, you are all allowed in ACA. You are all welcome. Any type of family trauma, whether it was physical, emotional, verbal, anything that made you feel like you cannot be your true self, that you're not allowed to feel your feelings, that they're not valid, or that you don't have a solid support system, please come to ACA. Just check it out. Go to 6 meetings. They say that that is the number of meetings you need to start coming out of denial. And just give it a shot. And don't feel like you can't be your true self. There are other people in the meeting, I promise you, who have had similar aspects to their upbringing than you did. And the more you share and the more you listen, the easier it will be to heal and the healthier the group will be as a whole.